Hello, and welcome to today's episode. I'm so glad you could join me. Whether you're listening during your commute, while you're getting things done, or just looking to dive into a new way of thinking, I'm excited to share some thoughts with you today. Now, you might be wondering what this conversation will be about, and more importantly, how we'll go about learning together. Well, I'm here to tell you, it's not going to be the usual lecture style you're used to. No, today, we're going to focus on how to approach learning in a way that's both meaningful and sustainable. See, learning isn't just about absorbing information, it's about engaging with it. It's about curiosity, asking questions, and most importantly, making connections. And when we talk about making connections, I don't just mean connecting dots on a page, I mean connecting ideas to your own life, your own experiences. That's where the magic happens. And let's face it, learning can sometimes feel like a challenge. It's not always easy, and that's perfectly fine. If it were too easy, we wouldn't be growing. In this conversation, I'll share some tools you can use to break down complex ideas, think critically, and take ownership of your own learning process. So how do we do this? First off, we ask questions. A lot of them. Don't just take information at face value. Question it. Challenge it. Because that's how real understanding happens. I'll encourage you to think about things from different perspectives. If you feel stuck on a topic, don't just brush it off. Let's explore it deeper. Sometimes, learning happens when we're willing to be uncomfortable with what we don't know and work through it together. We'll also talk about different learning methods. Some of you might be more visual, while others learn by listening or doing. There's no one-size-fits-all approach here. I want to share techniques that allow you to find what works best for you. Whether that's breaking things down into small chunks, using analogies, or even teaching what you've learned to someone else. And perhaps most importantly, we'll learn that making mistakes isn't a setback. It's a crucial part of the journey. Because every time you get something wrong, it's just another chance to refine your thinking, understand more deeply, and move forward with more clarity. So, in this episode, as we explore some big ideas and dive into the content, I encourage you to be an active participant in your own learning. Whether you're sitting in a classroom or simply tuning in for this conversation, remember, learning is something we do together. You bring your unique thoughts and ideas to the table, and I'm here to guide you, challenge you, and help you grow. Welcome to another episode of our Classroom Podcast, where we bring real-life conversations between students and teachers to life. Today, we have a student and a teacher engaging in a dynamic discussion about the importance of learning and how different methods can impact a student's understanding and growth. Good morning, class. Today, we are going to discuss a very interesting topic: why learning is important and how we can make the learning process more effective. Now, before I get into details, let's hear some thoughts from one of our students. What do you think, Alex?
Good morning, teacher. Well, I think learning is essential because it allows us to understand the world around us. Without learning, we wouldn't be able to communicate, solve problems, or even develop new ideas. But sometimes learning can be really challenging, especially when the material feels overwhelming or difficult to understand.
That's a very good point, Alex. Learning can indeed be challenging, but it is also rewarding. The key is to find methods that make it easier to absorb new information. Some students learn better by reading, others by listening, and some by doing hands-on activities. What do you think works best for you?
For me, I think I learn best through practical examples. When I see something being demonstrated or when I actually try to do it myself, I understand it better. For example, in math, just reading a formula doesn't help me much, but when I solve problems step by step, it starts to make sense. Also, sometimes learning with a group of friends helps because we can explain things to each other in a simple way.
That's a great observation. Learning through practice and peer discussion is actually a very effective method. When you teach someone else, you reinforce your own understanding. Now let's talk about motivation. Sometimes students lose motivation when they find a subject boring or too difficult. How do you personally keep yourself motivated to study, even when the topic isn't very interesting?
That's a tough question. Sometimes I do lose motivation, especially when I don't see the real-world application of what I'm learning. but I try to remind myself that every subject is important in some way. I also set small goals, like studying for 30 minutes and then taking a break, so I don't feel too overwhelmed. Also, when a teacher makes a lesson engaging by adding stories or interactive activities, it really helps me stay interested.
Excellent strategies. Setting small goals, taking breaks, and making lessons interactive are all great ways to stay motivated. As a teacher, I always try to connect lessons to real-life examples so students can see the practical use of what they're learning. Now, before we wrap up, do you have any advice for your fellow students on how to make learning more enjoyable?
Yes. First, don't be afraid to ask questions. If something doesn't make sense, speaking up can help you and even your classmates who might have the same doubt. Second, try different learning methods to see what works best for you. And lastly, try to make learning fun, whether it's through educational games, discussions, or even watching videos related to the topic. The more enjoyable it is, the easier it becomes.
That's great advice, Alex. Now, let's dive a little deeper into different ways to improve learning. Some students struggle with time management. Have you ever had trouble balancing studying with other activities?
Oh, definitely. Sometimes there are so many assignments and tests that it feels overwhelming. But I've found that creating a schedule really helps. I set aside specific times for studying and also make sure I have time for hobbies and rest. It keeps me from getting too stressed out.
Time management is crucial. A good balance between study and relaxation helps prevent burnout. Another challenge students face is staying focused, especially with so many distractions like social media and video games. Do you have any strategies for avoiding distractions?
That's a tricky one. I used to get distracted a lot, but I started using a timer to study in short bursts, like 25 minutes of focused studying, then a 5-minute break. It's called the Pomodoro technique. Also, I keep my phone away while studying so I don't get tempted to check notifications.
That's an excellent strategy. Short study sessions with breaks help maintain concentration. Another thing that helps is finding a good study environment. A quiet, organized space can make a big difference. Some students also find that listening to soft music or white noise helps them focus. Have you tried that?
Yes, I sometimes listen to instrumental music while studying. It keeps me from getting distracted by background noises, but it's not too engaging that it takes my focus away from my work.
That's a great tip. Now, let's switch gears a little. Do you think schools should introduce more hands-on learning activities instead of just lectures and textbooks?
Absolutely. I think learning by doing is much more effective. For example, in science, doing experiments instead of just reading about them makes it easier to understand concepts. The same goes for history. Watching documentaries or visiting museums can make history come alive.
I agree. Hands-on learning helps make subjects more relatable and engaging. Also, group projects and discussions can encourage teamwork and critical thinking. Speaking of teamwork, do you think working in groups is better than studying alone?
It depends. Sometimes working in groups is great because we can share ideas and help each other understand concepts. But other times, I prefer studying alone when I need to focus without distractions. I think a mix of both is the best approach.
That's a fair point. Learning styles are different for everyone, and finding what works best is key. Before we end today's discussion, do you have any final words for students who struggle with learning?
I would say, don't give up. Learning can be tough, but it's worth it. Find what study methods work best for you, stay organized, and ask for help when you need it. Most importantly, try to enjoy the process and stay curious.
Well said, Alex. Learning is a journey, and with the right mindset, it can be a fulfilling and enjoyable experience. Thank you for sharing your thoughts today.
Thank you, teacher. This was a really great discussion. I'm looking forward to learning more in our future lessons.
Me too. Keep up the great work, everyone. Until next time. To all our listeners, thank you for tuning in to this episode. Learning is a lifelong process, and it's something that doesn't stop when we leave the classroom. Every challenge you face in learning is an opportunity to grow. Whether you're a student or a professional, developing a mindset of continuous learning will always serve you well. Stay curious, explore new methods, and never be afraid to ask questions. Remember, knowledge is power, and the more we embrace learning, the more we can achieve. Keep pushing forward, Stay motivated, and we'll see you next time with another insightful discussion. Until then, happy learning.